Hello, everyone. Welcome to After Dark. This is your host, Laura B. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and a happy new year. I took a couple weeks off, but now we're back. This week's case is out of Oakville, Washington, and it's another heartbreaking story of a child not being protected by those around her. This case is even more maddening because this little girl was with a family that loved her and took care of her for most of her short life. But because of the so called reunification process, she was put in harm's way. Biological parents are the people who are supposed to provide comfort, insecurity, and a feeling of safety to their children. But this doesn't always happen, which is evident in this case. However, there was a family willing to provide all of those things, but they were ignored every time they expressed concern. This is the case of Oakley Carlson. To tell the story of Oakley, we have to start at the beginning. Eric and Jamie Jo Hiles met in high school. They started dating when they were 16 and fell in love. They got married 4 years later at the age of 20 while attending college to pursue their dreams of becoming high school teachers. Once they were done with college and had started down the path to their careers, they decided the next step was to start a family. They tried for years to have kids with no success. They decided to put those plans on hold for a while and just continue enjoying the lives they had made together. They figured kids would come eventually when the time was right. They had no idea the time was coming sooner than later and in a way they never expected. In July 2017, Jamie Jo got a text from a former student asking if she and Eric would foster a baby girl, 7-month-old Oakley Carlson. Oakley and her siblings had recently been placed into foster care after drugs were found in the home of her biological parents. The student knew one of Oakley's grandparents, and she wanted to make sure she went to a good foster home. Of course, Eric and Jamie Jo said yes. This was their chance to help a child and give it the love they so desperately wanted to give a child. Little Oakley was a smart and happy baby when the Hiles took her into their home. She instantly fit in with the family, and the Hiles felt like she belonged to them from the minute she arrived. You can imagine their excitement when, in the middle of 2018, Oakley's plan with DCYF was changed to adoption. The Hiles wanted Oakley to be their daughter forever. She already was calling Jamie Jo and Eric Mama and Dad. She had a special place in Eric's heart, though. She loved to be read to and even tried to read books herself. Every night, Eric would read with her before bed. Her favorite books were Brown Bear, What Do You See? I've Loved You Since Forever, I Love You, Blanky, and Night Night, Little Pookie. Oakley didn't know a stranger. She was always smiling and loved to make other people smile. She was kind, loved to tell jokes, was smart, empathetic, and used complete sentences, and was always asking questions, and loved to dance with Jamie Jo's dance team. The Hiles said there were many evenings when they would have dance parties in their living room. Oakley also loved to show how much she loved you. She would hug and snuggle you, and the love would just radiate off of her. No one could be sad with Oakley around. Jamie Jo said she would be on the couch watching a movie, and Oakley would be lying on the other end. But she would make sure her foot was touching Jamie Jo the whole time. She was a little girl who was full of love and wanted the same in return, and she definitely had it with the Hiles. Oakley Lynn Carlson was born on December 6, 2016, to Jordan Bowers and Andrew Carlson. Jordan and Andrew each had a child from previous relationships. Andrew a daughter and Jordan a son. Those two kids lived with the other parent. In Andrew and Jordan's home, they had their three kids together, a daughter who was born in 2015, Oakley, who was born in 2016, and a son who was born in 2019. Andrew had graduated from the police academy in 2012 and then became an Aberdeen police officer. In February 2017, Andrew was let go from the police force and lost his badge for making false or misleading statements. After that, it seemed he had trouble keeping jobs, the same as Jordan. In July 2017, 5 months after getting fired, the police had been dispatched to the house because of Jordan and Andrew's volatile relationship. During that call, they found drugs, court documents say meth in particular, in the home. The three kids Jordan and Andrew had together went to foster care, and the two oldest were still with the other biological parent. September 22nd, 2017 was the day Oakley joined the Hiles in their home. Jamie Jo said she noticed multiple red flags in Oakley's behavior that indicated previous abuse. The Hines loved the little girl, though, and after showing her love and bonding with her, they saw a complete change in her behavior. She was the happy little girl she should have been all along. In July of 2018, Jamie Jo found out the best news she could ever hope to receive. According to court and DCYF documents, Oakley's goal was getting changed to adoption. This meant she would be their forever daughter and they would be her forever parents. At this time, Andrew and Jordan only had supervised visits with the kids. Andrew had recently been booked on assault for attacking Jordan. It seems the couple was nowhere near the place of trying to put their life together for the kids. Andrew was ordered to undergo a domestic violence evaluation and to complete a domestic violence program. If he did these things, his charges would be dismissed. 9 months would pass after the plan for adoption was put into place, but nothing had changed. Oakley was still in the Hiles' care, but was still having visits with Jordan and Andrew. The Hiles were taking it day by day, but were becoming impatient. During this time, Jordan and Andrew had a 2-hour visit with Oakley. When she came home, she had slashes and red marks on her face. Jamie Jo contacted the visit supervisor, but she claimed to not know how it happened. She then emailed the DCYF caseworker, Angela. The response she got said, "I'm on vacation next week. Schedule health and safety for the first week I'm back." There was no mention of the marks on Oakley's face, and there never would be in the future. On May 13th, 2019, the domestic violence program that Andrew was in sent a letter to DCYF to report Andrew's failure to attend group sessions for the last 6 weeks. The prosecuting attorney asked the judge to find him guilty, so a series of follow up hearings were scheduled from July through September. The very July that Andrew was going to court for not following his treatment plan, the Hiles were notified that Oakley would most likely be returned to her biological parents in the near future. They weren't given any reason as to why her plan was being changed, especially when it looked like Jordan and Andrew were still on a downhill spiral. The Hiles were devastated by this news. Oakley had been their little girl for almost 2 years. She loved them and they loved her. How could the court send her back to people she barely knew? Jordan and Andrew may be her biological parents, but the Hiles were her mommy and daddy. Even with the goal now being reunification, the courts were still concerned there was drug use happening in the home. But it was DCYF who said it was okay to give Oakley back to Jordan and Andrew. However, for the next couple of months, the Hiles didn't hear from anyone. So they kept living each day with Oakley, making as many memories as they could and showing her how much they loved her. In September 2019, the assault charges against Andrew were dropped, even though he didn't complete the domestic violence program. Also, that same month, their supervised visits were increased. In October 2019, the Hiles had a meeting at the DCYF office with caseworker Angela and her supervisor Catherine. They were concerned with Oakley being returned to Jordan and Andrew too quickly. Andrew had just been in court because of domestic violence, but since it was dismissed, no one was concerned with it except the Hiles. They were also concerned about the possibility of drugs still being used and the fact that neither Jordan nor Andrew could seem to hold down a job. The reply they received was unbelievable. They were told that Oakley was not their daughter and that being poor was not a reason not to have your kids. All the valid concerns they had were completely dismissed. On October 19th, 2019, the first unsupervised visitation with Jordan and Andrew happened. The Hiles were worried the entire time she was gone. Just 7 days later, on October 26th, 2019, the second unsupervised visit occurred. This time, when Oakley came home, she told Jamie Joe that Jordan had hit Andrew. There is a video out of Oakley describing what happened. She says Andrew was being mean like Roar, and Jordan pushed him really hard. Jamie Joe once again emailed Angela and was told there was no concerns and that Oakley loved her mom and dad. First of all, a child might love their mom and dad, but that doesn't always mean the mom and dad are doing what they have to do to keep their child safe. And once again, the Hiles are Oakley's mom and dad. A mom and dad keep their kids safe and provide them with food and a comfortable home. They are up with them when they are sick and take them to doctor appointments. They are the ones that kiss their boo boos and wipe their tears. The Hiles had been doing these things for the past 2 years, while Jordan and Andrew were partaking in drugs, violence, and anything other than being parents. On November 6th, 2019, Jamie Joe emailed Angela and Catherine and said she heard overnight visits were going to start in just a few days. She got no reply. I'm sure you all are surprised. Jamie felt like things were moving way too quickly. Oakley had only known Eric and Jamie Joe as her parents. She should be given time to build her relationship with Jordan and Andrew, not just be abruptly removed from the only home she had ever known. They should give her time to get adjusted to these people who are basically strangers that visit her here and there for an hour while someone watched. Apparently, DCYF and the courts didn't find these concerns valid because they told the Hiles that Oakley would be returned to Jordan and Andrew even earlier than expected on the 29th of November, just 23 days from then. They had this little girl nearly 2 years, almost her entire life, yet were not even given enough consideration by anyone to let them know earlier that their sweet baby was leaving them. On November 9th, Oakley had her first overnight visit with Jordan and Andrew. The Hiles didn't get any sleep that night. They were wondering how Oakley was, if she was scared or confused or missing them. It felt like their hearts were slowly being broken into two. On November 17th, 2019, Eric decided to give Angela and Catherine a shot. He felt like he had nothing to lose at this point. He just wanted to try to get them to see that the transition was happening too fast. He wanted to know why the date had been moved up so abruptly. Of course, once again, no one responded to him. The dreaded day finally came, November 29th, 2019. the day the Hiles and little Oakley Carlson's life would change forever. Jamie, Joe, and Eric spoke about that day on Paramount Plus's Never Seen Again. Both Eric and Jamie Joe said that 2 hours before she left, they couldn't stop crying. Oakley had no clue as to what was going on. They tried to hold it together for her and cherish the last moments together that they had left. Oakley loved Daniel Tiger, Jamie Joe said as they put her in the car that day. Little Oakley said, "Grown-ups come back," just like in the song. Eric said, quote, "I could literally feel my heart breaking. We knew this would be the last time we would see her until she was 18 because we knew her parents wouldn't let her see us." Eric also said, "We had a hole that was left in us. I think we really grieved as if it were a death." They shut Oakley's bedroom for 6 or 7 months. They didn't want the heartbreaking reminder of the little girl who was taken from them. Oakley's new home with Jordan and Andrew was out in the middle of nowhere in Oakville, Washington. They lived on 300 acres with only one neighbor about a half a mile down the road. This also concerned the Hiles. They felt like being out away from people like that would make it easier to do things they shouldn't do around the kids, and there wouldn't even be anyone around to keep an eye on them. The Hiles weren't just going to go away, though. Oakley was their daughter, and they were going to do whatever they could to make sure she was okay. So they kept tabs on Jordan and Andrew. They knew whether they were working or not, any kind of trouble that they may be getting into, and if the kids looked okay. In July 2020, there was a custody hearing involving Jordan and Andrew, but it was not related to Oakley. Apparently, Jordan and Andrew did not complete some sort of court ordered services. Jordan was also not honest in her account of reporting domestic violence claims. Yet, this is the environment they wanted to put little Oakley back into and take her from the safe and loving home she had known all her life. At this point, DCYF was concerned with the welfare of Oakley's 6-year-old sister. It didn't seem that either Jordan or Andrew were able to meet her needs. She was on medication and had regular doctor appointments to attend. DCYF noted that they failed to take her to an appointment at Marybridge Hospital after they had been provided a gas card. Even with all of this coming out, they were still allowed to maintain custody. On Christmas Day 2020, 4-year-old Oakley spent the holiday with her family at the home of her paternal grandparents, Fred and Kate Carlson. According to King 5 News, Kate later told police that Oakley didn't look well during that visit. She had dark circles around her eyes, pale skin, and scratches or sores on her face. Kate called DCYF after the visit, but if you guessed she never heard anything back from them, then you would be right. According to court documents, Kate called DCYF, made great waves in the family, and Jordan and Andrew cut off all contact with them. Christmas Day of 2020 was the last day they ever saw Oakley. On January 26, 2021, Jamie Joe called DCYF to report concerns she had. She was still keeping tabs on Jordan and Andrew and was really concerned for Oakley's safety at this point. A friend had forwarded her a picture of Oakley that had been taken on Christmas by Kate that showed Oakley with a black eye. She had also heard that Andrew was fired from his job for drug use. Not only did the intake worker tell Jamie Joe that since she witnessed nothing firsthand, he would have to assume her information was inaccurate, but he also told her she could get in trouble for making false reports. Jamie Joe told him that since she was a teacher, she was considered a mandated reporter and that he needed to take her concerns seriously. The next day, on January 27th, 2021, DCYF opened a case. A caseworker went to the house to check on the kids. While she was there, she did make contact with Oakley. On February 10th, 2021, DCYF came to the house again for the second time in 14 days. This is the last credible sighting of Oakley. After this, 9 months go by. On November 6th, 2021, at 4:54 p.m., Andrew called dispatch to report a fire that had started in his home at around 10 a.m. that morning. He said him and Jordan had put it out. He just needed to make a report for insurance purposes. He said his 4-year-old daughter, Oakley, started the fire when she lit a lighter on the couch. They said they couldn't locate cell phones to call for help, so they grabbed hoses instead. No one was seriously injured, but they did lose most of their belongings. When the investigator came out to make the report, he said he believed the origin of the fire was actually in the kitchen and not in the living room. So, number one, they just so happened to find their cell phones 7 hours after they managed to put out the fire. They had a neighbor a half a mile away that they could have walked to in 8 minutes to get help. And number two, Oakley is 4 years old, yet she can flick a lighter enough to get it to light and set something on fire. I have trouble flicking a lighter and getting it to stay lit. I can't imagine it would be that easy for a 4-year-old. And where is the parental supervision? She should have never had a lighter in the first place. And number three, Jordan and Andrew continued to live in the house for quite a while after the fire. This fire wasn't small. The whole house was blazing. It was covered in black soot everywhere. The lights on the ceiling looked like they were melting. Everything was ruined and the house was dangerous, but going somewhere to keep the children safe wasn't a priority to them in that moment. I will post some pictures of the house on After Dark's Facebook page, or you can Google them yourself and find them. On November 10th, 2021, 4 days after the fire, Oakville Elementary Principal Jamie Swift went to the home to bring the family some supplies. She was there about 45 minutes that day. She said she asked about Oakley and was told that she was in timeout in her room. She had met Oakley in September 2020 when she went to the house to drop off a device for Oakley's sibling to do virtual school because of COVID. She went back 14 days later to drop off more supplies. She was only at the house 5 minutes this time. She saw the other three kids, but didn't see Oakley. A few days later, Jessica was having a weekly meeting with the primary teacher team at her school. One of the teachers told her she feared something bad was going on at the house. Jessica had already been having the same feeling, so it was time to go with mommy intuition and find out what was going on. Jessica started working on a plan. Jessica's daughter was friends with Oakley's 6-year-old sister. She called Jordan and invited the 6-year-old over for a play date and sleepover the next Saturday. Jordan said yes. Jessica took the kids swimming that day, and that night they were sitting around talking and playing when Oakley's sister said that one of the other siblings was always following her around. Jessica knew this was her chance. She asked if the other sibling followed Oakley around also. What the 6-year-old said next sent shivers down Jessica's spine. She said, "There is no Oakley." Jessica didn't say anything else about Oakley that night. She spent the rest of the evening comforting the little girl. The next morning at breakfast, the 6-year-old brought up Oakley on her own. She said she had went back to live with the foster family she had been with before because she had been bad. Jessica called the sheriff's department to find out if that was true, and the sheriff said no, she wasn't with the foster parents. Jessica didn't have a good feeling about any of what she heard and didn't want to send the little girl home until she could figure out if Oakley was okay and somewhere safe. She called Jordan and asked if her daughter could spend one more night at their house, and of course, Jordan said yes. So Jessica went into the next step of her plan. December 6, 2021 was a Monday morning. It was also Oakley's 5th birthday. She drove the two girls to school like it was any other day. After they had went into their classrooms, Jessica went into her office and called the sheriff's department and asked him to do a welfare check on Oakley. Jordan and Andrew were staying at a hotel in Tumblwater at this point. At 10 a.m., an officer with the Tumwater Police Department initiated a welfare check for Oakley. The only people in the hotel room were Jordan, Andrew, and their 2-year-old son. Jordan answered the door, and the officer asked her where Oakley was. And Jordan's answer was, with her mother. The officer says, "Aren't you her mother?" She then says yes and looks aggravated, like they are bothering her, and she has something better to do. She then turns to Andrew and says, "Oakley is with your parents," and Andrew agreed with her. The officer asked for Fred and Kate's address and phone number, but Andrew seemed to have a brain fart and couldn't remember either. He finally remembered the information and gave it to the police and then shut the door. Andrew then called dispatch to report his daughter missing. The police officers called Kate and Fred from the police car and learned that they had not seen Oakley in nearly a year. They said Andrew and Jordan got mad at them for calling DCYF, and so they had cut them out of their lives. At this point, the officers stayed nearby to keep an eye on Jordan and Andrew. At 3:30 p.m., they watched as they left the hotel and they followed them to their burnt up house. When they got there, officers continued to question Jordan and Andrew on the whereabouts of Oakley. Andrew did not seem surprised at all when he was told that Oakley wasn't with his parents. Jordan refused to answer any more questions. She became so uncooperative that she is arrested for obstructing an investigation. While inside the house, officers found what appeared to be blood on the blinds and the front door, as well as a bloody handprint on the wall in the downstairs hallway. During questioning, Andrew had limited information about Oakley's whereabouts and made statements to the effect of Oakley being dead or not coming back for a reunion. According to court documents, authorities also talked to Oakley's siblings. Her 6-year-old sister said she hadn't seen Oakley in a long time. They made a call to the Hiles to see if they had Oakley. They said they hadn't seen her since giving her back, but that they had contacted DCYF on multiple occasions expressing concern for Oakley and her siblings, especially after the fire at the house and the fact that they had been staying at the house after the fire. At this point, they knew Jordan and Andrew were lying and not cooperating and telling them where Oakley was. So on December 6, 2021, Oakley's 5th birthday, her parents were arrested. They were arrested on charges of obstruction of law enforcement and first-degree manslaughter. Authorities knew they only had 72 hours to find enough evidence or they would have to let them go. So they left no stone unturned and were boots on the ground the next couple of days. Law enforcement continued to search the family property. Grace Harper Sheriff's Office detectives, Washington State Patrol troopers, and the FBI were seen searching. A video taken by 5 King shows crime scene tape at the end of the home's driveway and tents set up in the yard. There also appeared to be investigators digging. They talked to the neighbor down the road who said they had noticed Oakley's school bus had stopped coming quite a while ago. On December 9th, 2021, the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office announced that Jordan and Andrew were no longer being held on the manslaughter charges. However, they were still suspects in Oakley's disappearance. They said the ground search of the property was extensive, and the sheriff's office also brought in divers and aircraft, but nothing of any significance was found. However, the couple got a new charge thrown at them. They now face charges of abandonment in the second degree after investigators discovered evidence the parents had not been providing medication prescribed to their other daughter for 15 months. After Jordan and Andrew were booked into jail, questions arose from the 6-year-old's temporary foster parents about a medication prescribed to her. Deputy Lee Saline asked Jordan where the medication was. Jordan reportedly told Celine that the 6-year-old was not on any medication, according to court documents. However, she was, and if she went without it, it could cause physical impairment or even death. On December 30th, 2021, Jordan and Andrew appeared in court for the abandonment charges. Before they could get into the courthouse, they were greeted by a group of angry citizens led by Jamie Jo Hiles, demanding to know where Oakley was. The couple ignored the yelling and signs that were held up, calling them monsters as they entered the courthouse in shackles. The judge found probable cause for one count in the second degree of abandonment for each of them. They had bail set at $150,000 and were expected back in court in January for their arraignment. On January 10th, 2022, Andrew appeared before a Grays Harbor Superior Court judge and entered a not guilty plea on the abandonment charges. Jordan was scheduled to be arraigned that afternoon. The judge set a trial date for April the 19th of 2022. It was set to last 4 days. Andrew and Jordan's cases had become joined, which means both of them would be on trial at the same time. The charge is a Class C felony that is punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. On February 7th, 2022, these two losers were charged with an additional 2 counts each of endangerment with a controlled substance. These charges came after finding that the two children who were put into foster care after their parents' arrest had methamphetamines in their systems. The authorities said that they had very high levels when tested, and it is a good possibility that they had ingested it. Both pled not guilty to those charges. On March 14th, 2022, Andrew changed his plea on the endangerment charge to guilty. Endangerment with a controlled substance is a Class B felony with a maximum of 10 years in prison and/or $20,000 fine. The judge said the expected sentence in Andrew's case was 6 to 12 months for each count due to the plea agreement. His sentencing was set for 9 a.m. on March 28th. Jordan also appeared in court that morning for a pretrial hearing, but her hearing was rescheduled to March 21st. Unlike Andrew, she kept her plea as not guilty, and her trial date was set for April 19th. On March 28th of 2022, Andrew was sentenced to 12 months in prison. He had no previous criminal history, so he was eligible for early release. He got out of jail on Wednesday, August 2nd of 2022, just about 5 months ago. Once he was released, he had to do random drug tests and could have nothing in his system unless he had a script for it. He also was ordered to have a chemical dependency evaluation within 45 days of his release, follow up with any treatment recommended, and provide proof to the court within 6 months. He was set to get the evaluation on September 12th of 2022. On April 8th of 2022, Jordan pleaded guilty to 2 counts of endangerment with a controlled substance, so the abandonment charge was dropped. On April 22nd of 2022, she was sentenced to 20 months in prison for 2 counts of child endangerment with a controlled substance. She was sentenced to 20 months in jail because of her previous criminal record. She is also not allowed to have unsupervised contact with any non biological children under the age of 18. Today, Andrew is out of jail and Jordan is still serving her sentence. However, there has been talk that she could be released as early as this coming January 2023, which is actually this month. Oakley is still missing, and though her extended family is trying to help and are cooperating, her parents are not. They are still suspects, but it looks like until Oakley is found or someone talks, this case isn't going to move, and Oakley won't get the justice she deserves. A $75,000 reward is being offered for information on the whereabouts leading to the safe return of Oakley Carlson. If anyone knows anything about the disappearance of Oakley, please contact the Grays Harbor Sheriff's Office at 360-533-8765 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. To speak to a detective directly, contact Detective Sergeant Paul Logan at 360-964-1729 or email sodetectives at co.grays-harbor.wa.us. And that's all for this episode. You can check out my Facebook page at After Dark Podcast or my webpage at www.afterdark2021.com. I'll be back next week with a new case. Until then, be safe.